Well, hello, this is Joan, and I've had a request to do another French diction coaching video. And for this video, I've chosen the song Un Canadien Errant. And before I get started, I just want to reassure you that I am a native French speaker. I'm very fluent in English, but I'm also equally fluent in French, having grown up in Quebec. So before I get started on this song, there's a few pitfalls that I want to talk about right away. And these are the pitfalls that really cause problems for Anglophones. And it sounds like U and even the E a little bit. Things like and a lot of those nasalized sounds. So oftentimes it's really just the tongue that makes the difference. So sometimes we get a little too bogged down in what our lips are doing, but we forget what our tongue needs to do. And a lot of the pronunciation is found at the front of the tongue and not so much at the back. So oftentimes people are pulling back their tongue and doing these sort of sounds, which get in the way of doing the more French sounding sounds. So something like an U, yes, it's very much rounded at the lips, but it's very much like an E where the tongue moves forward. E. You can see the difference if I say and E, and you can see the tongue just curl. Well, when you're doing an U sound, all you're doing is wrapping your lips around an E. E. So then it's the lips that change that E sound. So you get these sorts of situations, the sound as in malheureux, that's one of the hardest ones to explain because the tongue isn't so forward, it's closer to an or the sound in French, but even that for an Anglophone, it can be difficult to explain. So the tongue is flatter than an E. You get so it's closer to an So see how that gets narrower and narrower. The tongue is involved, but then the lips round on top. But I'm not going to get too bogged down at the front end. We'll just work through the piece, through the poetry together, and then I'll explain some of the pitfalls as we go. So the first line, Un Canadien Errant. So a couple of things I can say here. I'll work backwards. The R sound. Because this is a folk song, you wouldn't necessarily do the front flip of the R, errant. It would just sound very affected. But that can depend on the room you're in, the choir members. Are they able to do that sort of more throaty R? In French we call it grasseyé, but you could just say throaty R. You certainly don't want a pirate R. You don't really want a sound, but you want it in the back. And the best way I can explain it is to snore backwards. So if you imagine snoring, somebody who snores does this sound, right? And as they're inhaling, but I want you to imagine doing that sound the other way around, blowing air. So instead of going, you would go, it's the exact same spot. So I call it backwards snoring. So you would say the word errant, errant. Now you wouldn't exaggerate it like snoring, but that's sort of where it happens. Typically in other French pieces, we would roll the R. We would say errant, errant. And so that is not a mistake to roll the R. You just don't want to dwell on it, and it depends on the room and it depends on your singers. So both are permitted in folk songs. You just have to, it's a stylistic decision. So got errant out of the way. So first vowel, as in but a little rounded. Canadien. And so that's one at the end. The E sound that you hear, dia, is very quick and you think of it as a consonant. Don't think of it as a vowel. So it's just something you have to get through to get to the final sound. So you would say dien, dien. So you're going to Now you don't want to get too narrow. You don't want to go Canadien. That would be too narrow. You need to get it closer to an It's surprising how those sounds are very, very close to So let's do Canadien again. Canadien, Canadien. See, my lips have not moved. It's really just inside, and it's a subtle difference. Un Canadien errant. Un Canadien errant. Banni, banni, de, sound, not de, not de, but de, sound. C'est, foyer. Now I've heard a choir sing foyer, and this is a pitfall for most Anglophones. They would sing foyer, but no, it's foyer. This is definitely an A sound. It's absolutely essential that you get that A. You know, when we coach choirs, we pick our battles, but this is one you want to pick. Banni de ses foyers. Parcourez. So again, I'm doing the R back here. Parcourez. So, ou, definitely like an O, but you round it. I think that's a sound that is easier done for Anglophones. Parcourez. And then you will elide. You're going to link tant, parcourez tant. You've got to connect the T to the en. Parcourez tant, pleurant. Now, pleurant is a tricky word because you've got the EU, but it's not pleu. It's not raining outside. Il pleut. It's pleurant. That's just a pronunciation. The EU is often pronounced E, but in this case, it's much more of an A. Pleurant. Des pays étrangers. So you elide that S. Des pays étrangers. Now, pays is one where typically, even Francophones do this when they're singing. They sing pays. They put a yes sound, but there's no yes sound. It's pays. And you just do it really quick. Pays, pays. So it's a double sound, but there's no little ya in between. Des pays étrangers. Étranger. And that rhymes with foyer. Again, that's a battle you need to pick. It's an A sound, not étranger. That would sound very Anglophone. So, des pays étrangers. Okay, next verse. I'm going to go quicker through the next verses because I went through some of those difficult sounds right at the beginning. So the next verse, I'll read it through. Un jour, triste et pensif, assis au bord des flots, au courant fugitif, il adressa ces mots. Un jour, triste et pensif. So you have to elide those sounds. Triste et pensif. And really nice E sound, very French. Assis au bord. So that's a broader O sound. Bord, it's almost an O. Des flots. That's a very closed O. And keep in mind that assis and O are not linked. You don't say assiso because it sounds like you have scissors. So it's assis au, very round, au bord des flots. Au courant, courant, and again the ah sound is not courant, courant right in the nose. You have to open it up a bit. It's very close to an ah. Au courant fugitif. So we'll do that slowly. Fu, U. So U is very close to E. I-U. Fu. And then J, 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 tif. Fugitif. Fugitif. Il adressa ces mots. Don't pronounce the S at the end. There's a lot of silent consonants at the end of French words. So it's like flot and mot. You don't pronounce the T and the S. Next verse. I'll just read it through. Si tu vois mon pays malheureux, va, dis à mes amis que je me souviens d'eux. So here we go. Si tu vois mon pays. Again, you have pays. Be careful, not pays. But let's go back to the word voir. There is a because it's O-I, you have that wa sound, but you have to go straight to the ah. The beginning sounds, the ones that come before, think of them as consonants. That vous, ou part of voix, voix, you have to get it out of the gate really, really fast. So you can sing on ah. Si tu vois, si tu vois, si tu vois mon pays, so far so good, malheureux, malheureux. So the e sound is the tricky one. E. Again, it's like e, just round around an e. Mon pays malheureux. Va, easy. Dis à mes amis. So you have to elide mes amis, but you don't elide disa. It's tricky. It's a bit of one of those things where you just sort of know. I have never really truly figured out the rules, but I just know because I know. It's one of those things. And the last line, que, so it's not que and it's not que, but it's que, je, me. So they're identical. Que, je, me. So you don't need to move your lips. Sous, that's where you pucker a little bit. Sous, vient, and that's like Canadien. Same thing. Vient de. Again, that e sound like malheureux. It rhymes with malheureux. Okay, now into the fourth verse. Oh, you have a little accent, an accent circonflexe on the top. That makes it a nice round O, closed, nice O. Au jour. So it's ou, and with the r. You could roll it if that's your stylistic choice, but do not pronounce the S. It's not jours, it's jour. Si, plein, plein, it's very close to an A, un. Just the tongue that moves a little bit. Plein, but don't go plein. Just plein. Da, pas. Don't pronounce the S at the end. Da, pas. Au jour si plein d'appât, vous êtes disparu. So again, we elide the S on vous êtes disparu. You don't pronounce the S at the end. Je ne la verrai plus. So when you see AI at the end of a word, it's going to be an A sound. If there was an S, it would be E. But in this case, there's no S at the end, so it's verrai. Je ne la verrai plus. Au jour si plein d'appât, vous êtes disparu. Et ma patrie, hélas, je ne la verrai plus. I think I actually skipped that line. I went straight to the fourth line. So let's break down the third line. Et ma patrie, patrie is my country, ma patrie, hélas. And that you do pronounce the S at the end. Et ma patrie, hélas. And yes, the H, you don't say hélas. That's a silent H, but it's a glottal E. Et ma patrie, hélas, je ne la verrai plus. The last and final verse. I'll read it once through. Non, mais en expirant, ô mon cher Canada, mon regard languissant vers toi se portera. So the beginning, non, no, non, mais, eh. So you get the eh sound, and there's an S, and you will elide it. Maison. And again, the en, let me remind you, en, don't get too nasal. You need to have an ah sound in it. If you sacrifice too much of the ah, it'll get too edgy and nasal. Non mais en expirant. Especially in singing. In speech, it's a bit different. But when you're singing, you don't want to close that up too much. Oh, mon. And so when you're singing oh and mon back to back, they're almost identical. The oh just has a little bit of nasality. Oh, mon cher, cher. It's not cher, cher. Canada. Mon regard, regard. And then the last one, got to be careful with that, languissant. So the U there, it's not languissant. The U there is only there to harden the G. Because a G next to an I without the U would be J. It would be languissant. But that's not the word. The word is languissant. So the U is just there to change the G. Oh, mon regard languissant. Vers, and don't pronounce the S. You just say vers with the R. Toi. So toi is like the word voix. Toi. There's a wa in it. The beginning, the wa part, you have to get that out of the way really fast and go straight to the ah. Vers toi. So then you'll be holding vers toi. Se, nice and round. Portera. Or you might roll it, portera. Again, depends on the stylistic choice. So I have used the more throaty R, what we call grassillé in French, but that is a stylistic choice. In folk songs, it works really well. But, you know, if you've got a very large choir and you're in a large space, it makes a lot of sense to flip. Just do a quick little flip. And you could even choose certain R's as being rolled and certain R's in the back of the throat. If you have a soloist singing a verse, for instance, they might choose a more sort of common speech throat R, but then when the whole choir joins in, then you might have to roll the R. So there are stylistic choices. So if you're a chorister and you're listening to this and you think, oh, we're doing the R's wrong, you're not. It really depends on the stylistic choice of your conductor. But those are the two R's that you would consider. It would be ch or a r. If there's a then that is wrong. So I've gone through the whole thing. I'm just going to read it through now. So you could read, you could just listen to this ending and just sort of read along with me. By the way, I got the words off Wikipedia, but of course a lot of publishers and such would be publishing the lyrics. There are 5 verses, but sometimes versions will only do 4 of the verses. So it just depends. Un Canadien errant, banni de ses foyers, parcourait en pleurant des pays étrangers. Un jour, triste et pensif, assis au bord des flots, au courant fugitif, il adressa ces mots. Si tu vois mon pays malheureux, va, dis à mes amis que je me souviens d'eux. Ô jour si plein d'appât, vous êtes disparus, et ma patrie, hélas, je ne la verrai plus. Non, mais en expirant, ô mon cher Canada, mon regard languissant vers toi se portera. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. And there are plenty of versions of Un Canadien Errant. There are some on Cypress Choral, I believe it's .com. The Canadian music publishing has some versions of a lot of French Canadian songs that you can find some there as well. And until next time, bye.